My name is Kinsley Hartwell. I'm 32 years old, born and raised in a small town in Missouri. I'm the second of three sisters. My entire childhood, I grew up like a shadow next to the princess. The whole extended family adored my older sister, Vanessa. And me? They called me the difficult one, the daughter who never pleased our parents. At Vanessa's lavish engagement party, under crystal lights and the sound of champagne toasts, I walked in. Vanessa's dress was pure white, like she was the goddess of the night, and everyone bowed their heads as if witnessing something sacred. My father saw me, curled his lip in disgust, and announced in front of hundreds of guests, "This is the stubborn daughter who brings shame to our family." I didn't say a word. I simply walked up to Mr. Whitaker, the CEO of the bank funding most of the wedding. He was raising a glass of red wine when I leaned in slightly. "Mr. Whitaker, we need to cancel the sponsorship immediately." No one said a word. No one even breathed. My father stood frozen, because none of them knew. I was the largest shareholder of that bank. What would you do if your family only saw you as a burden until everything they had was in your hands? Leave a comment if you've ever been hurt by the very people you love. Hit like and subscribe if you want to follow this journey, because what's coming next will change everything. My name is Kinsley Hartwell. I'm 32 years old, and not once in my life have I ever been called someone's pride. I grew up in Fairbrook, Missouri, the kind of town where everyone knows each other from church potlucks, where the pretty girls are called town treasures, and the standout boys are promised bright futures by age 16. In a family of three sisters, I was the middle child, the worst spot if you want to be seen. Vanessa, the eldest, was a star from the moment she could walk. In a Christmas photo when it was 10, she wore a red dress with white lace, holding a brand new doll, posed between the tree and a fake Santa. I stood off to the side, clutching a book, eyes not even facing the camera. No one told me to smile. Vanessa had golden hair, bright blue eyes like she stepped out of a painting. She danced in school recitals, gave speeches at student council, and sat with our parents in the front pew at church every Sunday like she was proof they'd done something right. My mother used to say, "Vanessa was sent by God to make the world more beautiful." That line was repeated every year on her birthday, like a tradition. Our youngest, Rachel, was born 4 years after me, frail from the start. She spent her first 2 weeks in an incubator, and from then on, everyone called her a miracle. "She needs to be protected," my mom would say whenever I complained that Rachel didn't help with chores. And me? I was the one who can handle herself. I believe in you, Kinsley. You always manage just fine. You don't need as much as Vanessa. You're not needy like Rachel. They called it faith or quiet pride, but the truth felt more like being left out. When I was 12, I won first place in the state writing competition. The prize was a trip to Jefferson City to read my piece in front of state officials. That day, my dad couldn't drive me. Vanessa had a photo shoot with the cheer squad. I took the Greyhound alone, carrying my carefully printed essay and stiff new shoes. As I stood on stage reading My First Teacher, all I wanted was for someone in my family to hear my voice through the crackling mic. But no one came. In 10th grade, I joined the science club and was chosen to represent our team at the invention fair. I built a solar-powered water filtration model. Our group won third place statewide. When I came home, holding the certificate, my mom was mixing cake batter for Vanessa's picnic with her new boyfriend. She looked up, wiped her hands on her apron, and said, "Third place? Well, that's fine. Go ahead and eat. I'm busy." I folded the certificate and placed it under my bed. 2 weeks later, Vanessa announced she was selected to be the morning news announcer at school, and the whole family went out for a celebratory dinner. Eventually, I learned to celebrate myself in silence. A cup of hot cocoa after getting an A. A sticky note saying, "You did great," taped to my bedroom mirror. I kept track of my accomplishments in a black leather notebook, hidden under my winter sweaters. No one asked me what I dreamed of. No one asked if I was tired. By the time I was 16, Vanessa was on her third boyfriend, and Rachel was excused from doing the dishes because school stress was too much. I worked weekends at the town library to save up for extra textbooks. Every time I came home late, my father would shake his head. Girls sneaking around at night don't turn out well. I never argued. I just, I studied harder. My mother once told me late at night, when Rachel had a fever and she had just scolded me for not helping enough, "It's not that I don't love you. You're just not the kind that needs to be loved that way." I've never forgotten that line. I carried it with me to college, then to Denver, where I started a life no one knew about. I built everything from scratch. While my friends were still choosing majors, I was quietly coding a financial analytics tool from scratch. A venture capitalist stumbled upon it and emailed me, "We need to talk." I didn't go home for Thanksgiving that year. I didn't go back when Rachel graduated high school. No one called. No one checked in. 3 years passed. I became the co-founder of Blue Fern Capital, a fintech startup that began with me and two old classmates. We worked out of a cramped fourth-floor room in a worn-down building, surviving on coffee and popcorn. Today, our office looks out over the Rockies, and I lead the data analytics division. I own over 20% of the company and used most of my first profits to invest in local financial institutions, including Hawthorne Bank. But my family had no idea. They still think I'm just the struggling girl in the big city, no husband, no kids, no name worth mentioning, just someone buried in numbers at some unknown job. Until Vanessa's engagement. They sent me a gold-embossed invitation card with the bride and groom's names and a note. "Kinsley, we hope you'll come home to be the maid of honor. Dad says if you skip it, he'll reconsider helping with your MBA tuition." MBA? I'd graduated from that program 2 years earlier. Paid every cent myself. Not a dollar from them. I read the invitation 3 times, then folded it and placed it beside my morning coffee. It was thick, custom printed, clearly expensive. I sat up straight, opened my laptop, and checked Hawthorne Bank's most recent personal sponsorships. There it was, a $200,000 wedding fund, under the name of the groom to be Brent Miller. And right then, I made my decision to go back, not to be a bridesmaid, but to show every single one of them that the invisible girl they once dismissed now held the financial keys to their entire dream wedding. I thought maybe after all these years of absence, someone would call me, or at least send a warm message. But no. They sent a printed letter, in Times New Roman, as cold and stiff as a legal document. "Dear daughter," it began, like they were typing to a stranger. "We've agreed that you'll be the maid of honor for your sister Vanessa's wedding. It will be held on June 17th, at Whispering Pines Estate. Estimated costs for the dress, bachelorette party, and family gifts total $15,000. Since the family supported your final year of MBA tuition, we expect you to act with appropriate gratitude and contribute accordingly. Should you choose not to, attend or decline support, we will reevaluate our previous tuition agreement." I placed the letter on the table, unsure whether I should laugh or feel sorry for them. My MBA tuition at Stanford had been paid off in my first year. I covered everything with profits from a partnership contract between Blue Fern and an insurance company. They had never paid a dime. They never even asked where I was studying. I poured myself a glass of red Cabernet and stood by the living room window, gazing out at the soft, blurry lights of Denver beyond the glass. Part of me wanted to toss the letter into the fire, forget it like every past accusation. But another part wanted to walk into that wedding not as a bridesmaid, but as someone they had completely underestimated. I sent a short email to my father, Lawrence Hartwell. "I'll be back. But I'm not being a bridesmaid. And I'm not contributing a single cent to a wedding funded by a loan I currently control." Less than an hour later, my phone vibrated. An unfamiliar number from Missouri lit up the screen. I answered. "I don't understand what game you think you're playing." His voice was cold, metallic. "I'm not playing any game. I'm just being honest. And who do you think you are, meddling in family matters? This is your sister's wedding. It's her wedding, yes, but it's being financed by a bank I hold equity in. And I have every right to pull funding from any project I consider high risk." He was silent for a few seconds, then scoffed. So, you think a few numbers on a spreadsheet give you the right to stir up everything? You've always been like this. Stubborn, difficult, never listened. No, you've got it wrong, I said slowly. I tried to listen. I used to hope someone would ask me what I thought, but no one ever did. He hung up without another word. The next day, my mother called. Not to check in, just to confirm my flight details and remind me I should choose a dress in the blush pink Vanessa had picked for all the bridesmaids. I politely declined. I'll wear my own outfit. Something tasteful, appropriate, but not a bridesmaid dress. She sighed, like I had just declined an invitation from the president. Kinsley, you're going to humiliate the whole family. Mom, the family has humiliated me more than once, and nobody seemed to care. I flew into Fairbrook 3 days later, bringing with me a single suitcase that held a modest navy V-neck dress, a pair of nude heels, and a printed legal brief from Blue Fern's law office, just in case. Vanessa didn't come to pick me up at the airport. Neither did my parents. It was Rachel, my youngest sister, driving the old silver sedan I recognized as Grandpa's former car. Rachel looked older than in the last photo I had seen. Her hair was cut short, dyed caramel. Her eyes were cautious as I placed my bag in the trunk. I didn't think you'd actually come, Rachel said as we turned onto the highway. I wasn't sure either, until I finished reading our parents' letter. Rachel glanced at me, then gave a small laugh. Makes sense. Vanessa's losing it over you not wearing the bridesmaid dress. The whole family says you're trying to ruin everything. They've been saying that since we were kids. I know, she whispered, her voice dropping. And I'm sorry for never standing up for you. I turned to look at her. That face no longer looked naive. Rachel had grown up enough to see what had been ignored for years. It's okay. Now's when it all really begins. When we arrived at the house, it looked like a staged movie set. Paper lanterns strung across the front yard, a glowing white wedding tent, and sound check echoing from the garden. I wasn't surprised when I walked into the living room and saw Vanessa standing amid piles of invitations, dresses, and pastel-colored planning boards. So, you finally decided to show up? She turned, eyes clearly irritated. Have you gone to the fitting room yet? I'm not wearing the bridesmaid dress. Vanessa looked up, narrowing her eyes. Dad said you don't get a choice. Dad's not the one paying for this part of the wedding. That sentence froze the air for a beat. I could see Vanessa about to ask a question, but instead of curiosity, she fell into her usual pattern. You're so selfish. Everything always has to revolve around you. This is my big day. You've got an entire bridal team, a live band, a custom-designed gown, and a 6-figure budget. I brought a legal folder in my purse. I don't need your documents. I need you to act like a decent sister, just once in your life. I didn't reply. I just smiled, watching my sister, once hailed as the family's golden child, tremble over a single refusal. This story didn't begin at the wedding. It began with a child being told that being self-sufficient meant being ignored, and I had managed on my own. But now, it was time for them to understand. The cost of never seeing someone is that one day, they come back in a form you never expected. I walked away from Vanessa with slow but unwavering steps. The emotion inside me wasn't anger. It was a cold, sharp clarity, like moving chess pieces I had prepared years in advance. I entered my old room at the end of the upstairs hallway. The door still had a scratch on the knob, from where I once taped a note in 9th grade. Please knock before entering. No one ever did. The room was just as I remembered. Faded floral wallpaper, a pine desk still scarred from a birthday candle burn when I was 17. But what stopped me was the bookshelf empty. I opened the nightstand drawer, where I used to keep my journals filled with teenage dreams and plans. Empty. Not a single sheet of paper remained. I sat on the bed, feeling as hollow as the room. Then, almost by instinct, I pulled out my laptop and connected to Blue Fern's private network. The screen lit up with internal equity charts. My net worth was now $8.6 million, not including personal investments or rotating financial assets. The firm had closed 3 new deals just that week, and the Austin branch was finalizing expansion licenses. An invitation to the International Finance Conference in New York had just landed in my inbox. I watched the data scroll across the screen, then looked out through the worn window pane. Every number was a marker of a journey I had taken alone. No one in my family had ever asked what I did for a living. No congratulations when I made the 40 under 40 list from Business Insight. When I first appeared on stage at the Denver Financial Conference, speaking on behavioral risk analysis models, only my colleagues clapped. No relatives sat in the crowd. I had kept all of it to myself, not out of humility, but because I once believed no one in the family really cared. They didn't need to know. They just wanted me to stay quiet, not resist, not inconvenience them. This return wasn't about being a good daughter. I came back as a woman who knew her worth and would defend it, no matter what. That evening, the family ate early dinner in the dining room, still with the long oak table my father had built by hand, one of the few things he ever made without complaint. My mother sat at the head of the table, wearing the white pearl necklace I had given her on her 60th birthday, which she had believed came from Vanessa. My father sat across from me, his face as hard as marble. Vanessa, seated next to him, kept checking her phone. Rachel sat quietly beside me, saying nothing, but I could feel that her silence carried more weight than I expected. "Did you send the playlist to the DJ yet?" my mother asked Vanessa. "I did, but Brent wants to change the song for the cake cutting. He thinks an acoustic version would be more romantic." I heard the details like echoes from another room. Then suddenly, dinner took a turn. "And you?" my father said, without looking up, still refusing to wear the bridesmaid dress. "I'm not a bridesmaid," I replied calmly, "and I don't need to pretend I'm part of this performance." "This isn't a performance," he said, voice icy. "This is family. And family sacrifices for one another." I smiled, slowly set my fork down on the plate. "Sacrifice," I repeated. "Like when I was 12 and had to get myself to competitions because no one would drive me? Or when I had a fever for 3 days straight, but Mom was too busy taking Vanessa to the salon?" My mother set her glass down louder than necessary. "You still haven't let go of those petty things?" "To me, they weren't petty," I said. Vanessa looked up, her tone mocking. "Here we go again. You always play the victim. We're here to have dinner, not listen to your grievances." I looked straight at her, unwavering. "Do you know your wedding is being financed by a bank I'm a major shareholder in?" The air froze. "What?" my father growled. "Brent took out a business loan from Hawthorne Bank. Hawthorne is one of the institutions Blue Fern holds equity in. I'm the one who approves funding lines for corporate packages under $2 million. Vanessa stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "You're kidding." "No. And Brent isn't a successful entrepreneur. He had a company investigated for tax misreporting in Florida in 2018, a civil lawsuit in Texas in 2020 for misusing funds, and he's currently operating under his third alias, which I have documented proof of." My father slammed his hand on the table. "That's enough." I opened my bag and pulled out a sealed folder. "This is a preliminary investigation report. I hired a legal firm in Denver to run a background check on Brent. His real name is Brent Roscoe. He's changed identities twice and had his records temporarily sealed by his private attorney. This file isn't complete, but it's enough for me to request the bank to suspend disbursement." No one said a word for several seconds. Then Vanessa jumped to her feet, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "What are you trying to do? Ruin my wedding?" "No, I'm trying to protect you. By exposing everything at the last minute? Making me look like a fool in front of everyone?" I stood too, eyes still locked on hers. "If you marry him, you'll lose more than your dignity. You'll lose all your money. You'll lose trust in yourself. And if I don't speak up, I'd be letting that man destroy you the same way this family once left me behind." No one responded. No one defended me. But no one told me to leave the table either. I gathered the folder, placed it back in my bag, and went upstairs. That night, I opened my laptop and sent an internal email to Hawthorne's chief risk officer, attaching all the evidence I had. The subject line was just 3 words: suspend disbursement immediately. The chessboard had just shifted. The next morning, I woke to loud knocking and my mother's voice shouting up the stairs. "Kinsley, get up. The event crew is arriving. We need you to help set up the tables outside." I glanced at the clock. 6:15 a.m. I stared at the ceiling. The crack in the upper left corner was still there from when I was in high school, after the house foundation shifted during a week-long rainstorm. My father had promised to fix it. But he got busy. And so did I. Learning how to stop waiting, I slipped on a light jacket and headed downstairs. In the kitchen, my mother was brewing coffee, her hair neatly rolled, her eyes glancing past me toward the apron in my hand. "You can start polishing the glassware. And the crystal tray in the cabinet. I want everything, sparkling before the photo crew arrives." I didn't reply. I picked up a cloth, opened the cabinet, and began wiping each glass like a server preparing for a grand event I hadn't been invited to. My sister wasn't in the kitchen. Rachel was wrapping party favors in the living room, moving quietly like she was afraid to disrupt the atmosphere. By 9 a.m., the event coordinator arrived, a woman in her mid-40s, with dark sunglasses and a clipboard, surveying the house like she was planning a military operation. "You must be Kinsley," she said, glancing quickly at me. "I am." "Good. Then I need you to help set up the flower stands in the backyard. Hydrangeas go on the left, white roses on the right. Don't mix them up." I followed her outside. The sky was still misty, the grass was damp. I rolled up my sleeves and began lifting the heavy wooden frames, arranging the flowers exactly as mapped. 2 hours later, I came back inside to find my mother scolding the Rashit cake delivery man for being 10 minutes late. Vanessa sat at the vanity, wearing a soft ivory silk robe, her hair clipped up, waiting to be styled into waves. When she saw me walk in, she looked through the mirror and said clearly, "Are you planning to stay dressed like that through the entire prep? At least put on something decent. And your hair looks like it hasn't been brushed since last year." I paused, then nodded. "Then let me go clean your room. The bridal suite can't have a speck of dust." Vanessa flicked her hand without a word, but her eyes were pleased, like I was finally playing the role I'd been assigned. The invisible middle sister, only here to make others shine. Her room was a mess of dresses, gift boxes, and cosmetics scattered across the bed. I picked up the underwear on the floor, fluffed the pillows, and smoothed the sheets. In the vanity drawer, I found an envelope containing a Hawthorne Bank loan pre-approval document, signed by Brent. The amount listed, $215,000. I quietly tucked it back in place, pressing the envelope edge flat. When I went down to the kitchen, my father was standing with Brent, the two of them reviewing the outdoor stage layout. Brent wore a crisp white shirt, a luxury watch, and had his hair slicked back in a classic style. When he saw me, he turned with a polite but hollow smile. "Well, so, this is the mysterious sister. I heard you do accounting?" I looked at him. "Close enough." Brent raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. You're into spreadsheets and graphs, risk analysis, quarterly reports?" I smiled faintly. "Actually, I'm co-founder of a fintech company specializing in behavioral finance forecasting and market analytics. Bluefern Capital." He hesitated for a brief moment, just enough for me to catch the flicker in his eyes. Then, like a machine, he turned his smile back on. "Bluefern, huh? Sounds promising. Fintech is booming these days. Maybe. We should talk investment after the wedding." "Absolutely," I said, holding his gaze. "After dinner, I'll show you more about what I actually do." Brent gave a soft chuckle and nodded. But in his eyes, I caught a small crack, a flash of caution he didn't manage to hide. I left the kitchen with my heart steady. Every word I said served a purpose. Every move I made was calculated. I didn't come home to be a spectator, and I wasn't here to prove I was better. I came back to place the truth right in the middle of the fantasy they were building. That afternoon, I was assigned to pick up the printed menus. The print shop truck had just arrived when I got there, and the driver pulled out 2 large boxes. I went over the menu list, and one line caught my eye. Brent's signature cocktail, the Visionary, printed in italics, framed in gold trim. I laughed to myself. A man who once scammed 3 women across 3 different states was now being honored as a brilliant investor through the name of a mixed drink. Later that night, after everyone had drifted off to their rooms, exhausted, I sat alone on the back steps. The moon was high, casting a silvery light over the rows of chairs already lined up for tomorrow's guests. I thought back to the first article Blue Fern was ever featured in. The reporter had asked me, "If you could say one thing to the people who once looked down on you, what would it be?" I had answered, "I don't need to say anything. Success makes its own sound." And now, that sound was rising slow, but unmistakable. In every step, every glance, every word that didn't need to be loud. Tomorrow was the rehearsal, and I knew not everything would go the way they planned. I entered the dining hall just as the last glass of champagne was being poured along the white silk-covered table. Across the room, Brent stood among a group of sharply dressed men, including my father, looking right at home, as if he were born to be the center of attention. The evening host took the mic to introduce the wine tasting, and polite laughter rippled across the tables as Brent raised his glass and gently tapped it. "I hope everyone here is ready for a promising new chapter," he said confidently, his gaze sweeping the room like he was addressing a board of investors. "Not just a chapter in marriage, but in financial growth. I got confirmation this morning that the land in Austin has finally been cleared. We're standing at the edge of a golden opportunity." I stood near a column by the window, holding a glass of water, eyes fixed on him. "We're developing an eco-resort compound just 12 minutes from downtown. Land value in that area has jumped more than 30% in the past 6 months. And thanks to personal connections, I have access to a preferred investment package I believe some folks in this room may be interested in." I didn't need to look to know who was already nodding along. My father, always dreaming of one last legacy deal before retiring, was the first to speak up. "Son," he said, grinning with pride, "if what you're saying is true, this sounds like a chance we can't pass up." Brent placed a hand on his shoulder, patting it like they were old business partners. "I'll send you the full proposal tomorrow morning. Initial contribution is only about $120,000, but spots are limited. This kind of opportunity doesn't wait." I placed my glass on a nearby side table and quietly took my phone from my purse. Within minutes, I found the company Brent mentioned, an LLC registered in Texas 6 months ago, with no official website and no listed office address. Under the legal history section, 3 items appeared: 1 lawsuit for investor misuse, 1 contract dispute, and 1 delisting request from the local exchange board. I closed my phone and walked straight over to my father, who was laughing, with 2 old friends from his golf club. "Can we talk privately for a second?" He looked at me, slightly puzzled, but nodded. We stepped into the small hallway between the dining room and the wine storage. "What is it?" he asked, still holding his half-full glass of champagne. I just looked up the company Brent talked about. His expression changed quickly, from relaxed to irritated. "Again, Kinsley? Can't you let people have one peaceful night? Do you know that company was formed less than 6 months ago, doesn't have a valid tax ID, and has already been sued for financial fraud?" He tightened his grip on the glass. "Brent's a sharp guy. Not everyone sees potential the same way." "No, but anyone can verify public records if they care to know the truth." "You're always like this," he muttered. "Negative, interfering, acting like you know everything." "I don't know everything," I said quietly. "I just know how to see the data that others ignore. That's my job." He shook his head, his disapproval plain in his eyes. "Your sister is about to marry the perfect man. And you can't stand it, that's why you're digging." I took a slow breath. I don't need Brent to fail for me to feel right. But I'm not going to stay silent while this entire family is being manipulated by someone who's done this before. I held out my phone, showing him the information. He didn't even look. He turned away, voice low and cold. "You are not allowed to ruin this." And what if stopping this is the only way to keep everyone from losing everything? He said nothing, just walked back into the party, leaving me alone under the soft hallway lights. I returned to the table without saying another word. Brent shot me a quick glance, as if his instincts were picking something up. But he kept smiling, kept raising his glass, kept talking about his international contacts with investors in Dubai and Zurich. I pulled out my phone again and sent a message to the director of risk at Hawthorne Bank. Temporarily suspend review of Brent Miller's investment account. Evidence of potential identity and funding discrepancies. My fingers trembled slightly as I hit send, but inside, I felt clearer than I had in years. I've gotten used to not being believed, but that has never stopped me from doing what needed to be done. Just minutes later, I received confirmation from the system. The file was now marked under further review. Disbursement would be paused for at least 5 days, just enough time for me to do what had to be done. Brent was still raising his glass, chatting animatedly. Vanessa sat beside him, eyes sparkling with joy. My mother stood behind them, gripping her trial bouquet tightly, her gaze full of pride as she looked at her future son-in-law. I watched them, wondering what would happen if they knew what I had just done. I didn't come here to tear things apart. But if truth is a rainstorm, they can't blame me for building their house out of sand. I wasn't heading back to Denver. Not yet. Not when everything beneath the flawless surface of this lavish wedding was starting to crack like thin ice. After the wine tasting, I called Vivian, an old friend from Stanford, who now ran a private firm specializing in high-level financial and background verifications for venture capital groups. I need a rush report, I said as soon as the call connected. Name's Brent Miller, lives in Missouri, might have used an alias in Florida. I suspect financial fraud. Timeline, 48 hours. Vivian didn't ask why. She simply replied, "Got it. Send me everything you've got. I'll put someone on it right away." I forwarded everything I had Brent's ID used to register the company in Texas, the account number tied to his Hawthorne Bank transactions, and a copy of the deposit contract Vanessa had stuffed in her drawer. In less than 8 hours, I received an email from Vivian. The subject line read, "Match indicators found. We need to talk." The next morning, I sat in a small-town cafe. Faded lights spilled through dusty windows, early sunlight creeping over the cracked leather booths. My laptop screen displayed the report from Vivian, 18 pages of documentation, including at least 3 different profiles with facial recognition matches nearly identical to Brent. Brent Miller, his current name, was the third legal identity he had used through civil documentation changes. Before this, he had gone by Edward Kessler in Florida and Ethan Roscoe in New Jersey. Each name was tied to a limited liability company that had since closed, and each time, a woman suffered severe financial loss after getting engaged to him. I paused at the section describing the case in Orlando, Florida. The victim's name was Sharon Ellis, 42 years old. She worked as an accountant for a small construction company. Brent, back then calling himself Edward Kessler, made her fall in love and invest in a startup venture. The money lost, over $70,000 and an engagement ring worth $8,200, purchased on her personal credit card. His company vanished 3 days before the wedding, leaving Sharon with unpaid bills and a typed, unsigned goodbye letter. I sat quietly in that cafe, fingers curled gently around the handle of my coffee cup. Outside, the peaceful town was preparing for a wedding, but I knew the man my sister was about to marry wasn't a groom. He was a repeat offender, operating in cycles, with careful planning, disappearing every time, right on cue. I called Vivian. "Is she still in Florida?" I asked. Vivian replied, "She's living in Gainesville. I can connect you if you want to meet her in person." I drove there that afternoon. Through sun-dappled roads, my mind couldn't stop picturing Vanessa in her wedding dress. My sister once believed in fairy tales, and now, if I did nothing, she'd wake up in a nightmare with no escape. I arrived at Sharon's apartment around 3:30. A simple, slightly worn white 2-story building. I rang the bell. When the door opened, the woman before me wore a light blue sweater, her hair tied low, Her eyes were hollow, her voice calm. "I'm Kinsley," I said. "I'm from Missouri. I believe the man you were once engaged to, Edward Kessler, is now using the name Brent Miller, and he's about to marry my sister." Sharon didn't react at first. Then she slowly opened the door wider. "Come in." We sat at a small dining table in the kitchen. On it sat a warm cup of tea and a photo frame turned face down. Sharon quietly flipped it over. In the photo, she and Brent, or rather Edward, stood together on a beach. He was smiling, arm wrapped around her shoulder. She looked at him like he was the last miracle left in her life. "He made me believe I deserved to be loved again," Sharon said slowly. "After my divorce, I'd lost nearly all faith. He showed up at the right time, in the right way. Gentle, attentive, patient." I didn't interrupt. Then he talked about building a business, invited me to invest. We started small, then more. When I asked about contracts, he told me I shouldn't doubt the man I was about to marry. I nodded. He vanished 3 days before the wedding. The account was empty. My mother had to use her retirement savings to help pay my debts. The police said it was a civil transaction, no proof of coercion, no arrest. I stayed silent for a long moment, then reached into my bag and handed her the file I had compiled. "He's doing it again, with a different name." Sharon flipped through each page. She stopped at a photo of Vanessa and Brent in their wedding trial shoot. "She doesn't deserve this," Sharon whispered. "No one does," I replied. She stepped into her bedroom. A few minutes later, she returned with a folder. Inside were photos, bank statements, text messages, receipts for the ring, and a handwritten letter she had once written to Edward but never sent. "You can use everything I have," Sharon said, resting her hand gently on the folder. "If you can stop him from doing this again, do it." I looked at her. Her eyes no longer belonged to a broken woman. They were the eyes of someone who had just found meaning in the pain she had endured. As I drove away from Gainesville, the late afternoon sun painted the road gold. The file sat safely on the passenger seat. I didn't know how Vanessa would react, or what my parents would say, but I knew I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. And now, I held something Brent couldn't deny, the real trail of the past he tried so hard to bury. I sat on the living room sofa, resting my hands on the thick file in my lap, the warm ceiling light casting soft shadows across the dark. Wood coffee table. Tonight, I asked for a family meeting, not to ask permission, but to confront. My mother sat at the head of the table, a hand-embroidered shawl draped over her shoulders, her eyes expecting something perhaps the same old compliance. My father leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, wearing a look of half suspicion, half irritation. Vanessa sat across from me, silk nightgown draped over her knees, hugging a pillow like it might shield her emotions. Brent sat right beside her, composed, hands interlocked like he was attending a board meeting. I opened the case file, pulled out 4 pages, and laid one in front of each person. "This is the background investigation report I've compiled over the past 3 days. It includes public records, documents from judicial offices in Florida, Texas, and New Jersey, and a direct statement from one of the victims." I turned to Brent. "Do you know Sharon Ellis?" Brent didn't blink. He tilted his head slightly, a faint smile on his lips. "Never heard of her," he said calmly. "That name doesn't ring a bell." I looked him straight in the eye. "She was once engaged to you when you were using the name Edward Kessler. She's also the woman whose accounts you emptied, leaving her with $70,000 of debt." Vanessa shot up from her seat. "Kinsley!" she shouted, eyes red and swollen. "Are you trying to turn my wedding into a circus?" I didn't respond right away. I flipped to the second page. "This is a copy of the investment contract Brent sent to Dad from Austin. The company has no real estate license, no approved city planning projects. All they have is a weed-covered lot and a pending bank loan that hasn't been released." My father picked up the printout, eyes fixed on the recipient's name. "Brent Roscoe." His voice dropped. "What is this about?" Brent turned and grabbed Vanessa's hand. "Sweetheart, this is just a misunderstanding. Someone's impersonating me to ruin our happiness. I couldn't hold back a small laugh, even though bitterness burned inside. You think I can't verify biometric data? Photos, voice samples, banking records, they all match. Vanessa sprang up, her voice cracking. You're jealous. You've always been jealous. Since we were kids. You hated when people paid attention to me. You hated when mom and dad loved me more. And now you want to ruin the most important day of my life. No, I answered, softly enough that it surprised me too. I don't need to ruin anything. You chose to trust someone who wasn't real. I'm just the one picking up the glass before it cuts your hand. My father slammed the papers on the table. This is why we never rely on you. Always questioning, always doubting. No one can live in peace with you in this house. My mother looked down, saying nothing. She just clutched the sleeve of her sweater like she needed, something to anchor herself in the thick air. I turned to Brent. I'm giving you a chance to explain. Brent smiled, that same fake smile I'd seen on scam fundraisers, polished faces on stage that were empty behind the curtain. Honestly, I forgive you, he said slowly, as if performing for the entire room. Kinsley's clearly under pressure. She's lost. Maybe because she's never had a real relationship. Maybe because she feels abandoned. I stood up. You don't have the right to speak about my personal life. Especially when I'm holding a file with 3 women who were all once engaged to you, and all of them ended up with nothing. Brent started to rise, but I held up a hand. You should stay seated. The room thickened with silence. No one spoke, no one breathed. Vanessa screamed, "Get out of my house." I looked at her, then at my parents. I will leave. But before I walk out that door, I want everyone in this family to look reality in the eye. The man you call future family is a fraud. A man already planning to disappear after draining everything. I pulled out the photo of Brent, or Edward, or Ethan with Sharon at the beach in Orlando, and placed it in front of my mother. You don't have to believe me, but I won't let another one of my warnings get buried under your indifference. I gathered the documents and carefully stacked them. I've already requested the bank to halt the disbursement. If anyone in this family wants a second opinion, I can refer you to a law firm that specializes in financial fraud. I turned away without waiting for a reaction. Just as my hand touched the doorknob, my father's voice rang out behind me, low and cold. If you walk out, don't come back. I turned around, locking eyes with my mother, the one who hadn't spoken a word the entire meeting. Her eyes were glassy with tears, but she didn't stand. She just sat there, as if bound by a lifetime of silent resignation. I nodded. I understand. Then I opened the door and stepped outside, carrying the truth they refused to face, and the heavy silence of a family that always chose comfort over confrontation. I left my parents' house just as night had fallen. The air outside was unusually still, filled only with the soft hum of insects echoing from the backyard. Wind rustled through the roadside trees, their leaves whispering like they, too, had something to say. I sat behind the wheel of the rental sedan, my hand resting on the file in the passenger seat. The warm glow of the porch light blurred in the rear-view mirror, fogged by the condensation of my breath. I didn't look back. On the way to the small hotel I had booked since the day I arrived in Fairbrook, I called the CEO's office at Hawthorne Bank. On the other end was the executive assistant, crisp, efficient, professional. I need to speak with Mr. Whitaker, I said. It's regarding the special credit package approved under the name Brent Miller, around $200,000. May I have your name so I can transfer the call? Kinsley Hartwell. Direct shareholder, 17% ownership through Blue Fern Holdings. She paused for a second before her voice grew more alert. One moment, please. Less than a minute later, Mr. Whitaker's voice came through low, familiar, a bit cautious. Kinsley, I heard you're in Fairbrook? I need your help to immediately suspend the disbursement for the wedding project under Brent Miller. I've just verified signs of identity fraud and federal-level financial deception. Do you have proof? I have judicial records from 3 states, a victim's statement, and transaction data linked to suspicious activity. I've sent the entire package to the internal secure email. Access code is attached. I could hear the rapid tapping of his keyboard on the other end. That loan hasn't been fully released. A portion is still pending final signature from the Missouri branch. Put it on hold now, I said firmly. Based on ethical risk and the likelihood of fraud, I'm requesting a freeze under Clause B3 of the internal approval policy. He stayed silent for a few seconds. I'll forward the request directly to the branch director. This is going to cause waves. I don't mind, I replied, as long as it stops in time. The next morning, I woke up to the hotel phone ringing at 6:32. Kinsley Hartwell? The man's voice on the other end was tense. This is Mr. Stewart, branch director at Hawthorne Bank in Fairbrook. I'm listening. We just received a directive from headquarters to suspend the disbursement on the credit loan under Brent Miller's name. It appears the investment board found irregularities in his ID documentation. We've contacted the guarantor directly. That would be my father, I said quietly. Yes, he didn't seem pleased, but we're obligated to investigate. I just wanted to confirm if we need additional legal documentation. Would you be able to assist? I have all the evidence prepared. I'll send it to the legal department if necessary. Thank you, Miss Hartwell. You may have just saved the bank from a potentially serious situation. I sat silently on the hotel bed, phone resting beside the still warm cup of tea. The cold white wall in front of me seemed to reflect that last sentence. I didn't know what serious meant to them, how much money lost, how deep the risk, but to me, serious was a family that had lost the ability to tell truth from illusion. A family so blind they were ready to marry off their daughter without asking a single question. At 9 o'clock, my phone rang again. This time, it was my father's number. I stared at the screen, its light blinking steadily. My chest tightened, but I answered. What is this? His voice was sharp, restrained. Why is the bank refusing to release the funds? You're behind this, aren't you? I'm not behind anything. I'm standing right in front of it, I replied. You're trying to ruin the wedding? I'm stopping a financial scam that no one in this family wants to believe is real. Do you realize how far this humiliation will spread? The church board, your mother's friends, my golf circle, everyone will know. The only thing people should know, I said calmly, is that Brent is not who you think he is, and letting him into this family would have been far more shameful. My father went quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, defeated, like a man who had just lost something he could never reclaim. What kind of person have you become? To do this to your own sister? What kind of person have I become? I closed my eyes and kept my voice even, someone who doesn't close her eyes anymore. I hung up without waiting for a response. An hour later, I received a message from Rachel. Dad just left the house. Mom locked herself in her room. Vanessa's crying in the dressing room. Brent's been on the phone nonstop, looks super stressed. I replied, Where are you? In the kitchen. I'm boiling ginger water for her. But honestly, I don't know if I should bring it. If I were you, I wouldn't. 3 minutes later, Rachel texted again. Thank you for not staying silent. I read that message 3 times. Then I put down my phone, opened my laptop, and checked the internal email inbox. There was a new message from the Hawthorne Legal Department confirming receipt of all the documents I had sent. A copy had also been forwarded to the Federal Financial Fraud Division. I scanned through each line, each attachment name. Deep down, I knew I hadn't broken anything. I had only stopped something before it happened. And sometimes, that's far harder to do. That morning, I was sitting by the hotel window, a steaming cup of herbal tea in hand. Morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, illuminating the pile of documents I hadn't yet reorganized after a sleepless night. My phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Kinsley. Her voice was hoarse, urgent. Can you come to the house? Something's happened. I didn't ask. I exhaled slowly. I already knew. And I knew that, finally, it had happened. When I walked into the house, the air felt like it had been vacuumed out of the room. My father sat motionless on the couch, head in his hands, elbows on his knees. My mother stood near the fireplace, her eyes fixed on a crack in the wall as if trying to see through it into something deeper. Rachel stood nearby, holding her phone, looking at me like she was hoping I'd brought an answer. Vanessa was nowhere to be seen. Brent is gone, my mother said, not turning around. No one can reach him. He shut off all his numbers. I set my bag on the table. No need for questions. I'm guessing, I said slowly. The investment the family trusted him to manage disappeared with him? My father lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot. $80,000. Family money, Vanessa's, your mother's, and the result of a collective blindness. I said, not cruelly, not sarcastically, just truthfully. I had no energy left to cushion their grief with politeness. My mother looked at me like she was seeing me, in a form she had never allowed herself to recognize. Where's Vanessa? I asked. Rachel answered softly. In her room, doors locked. I hear her crying. I nodded, then reached into my bag and pulled out the carefully organized folder I'd put together last night. I placed it on the wooden coffee table in front of my parents. This is the agreement. 3 clauses. If the family truly wants my help handling the legal side of this, these are my conditions. My father glared. You're making demands of your own family? I'm not making demands, I replied, holding his gaze. These are boundaries. After years of being treated as the outsider, minimized, ignored, this is the only way I can step into your chaos without losing myself. I opened to the first page. First, the entire family must sign a written acknowledgement of the clear favoritism in how we were treated, and that I, Kinsley Hartwell, was repeatedly dismissed regardless of my accomplishments and efforts. My mother stepped back half a pace, as if struck in the chest. Second, I continued, my personal finances are no longer up for discussion, inquiry, or comment by anyone in this family. I looked at her, then at my father. No one has the right to ask how much I make, where I invest, or what I contribute to. And third, I closed the folder and pushed it toward him. I will assist with the legal process. I have contacts at the bank and in financial justice. But I will not pay a single dollar to fix this mess. You want us to sign this? My mother asked, voice trembling. It's not a want, I said. It's a need. My father stayed silent for a long moment. His gaze was no longer sharp like the day before, just the heavy stare of a man who had just watched everything he believed in crumble at his feet. What about Vanessa? He asked. She doesn't need to sign, but if she wants my help, she has to agree to the third condition. Rachel gently pulled out a chair and sat down beside me. I'll sign as a witness, she said, her voice steady and calm. I'm a witness to the silence. My mother sat down slowly. I looked at her hands for the first time in my life. I saw them tremble. Can I have some time to think? She asked. Of course, I nodded. But the bank and the investigative unit can't wait long. They need the information within 36 hours. My father didn't say a word. He simply reached out, picked up a pen from the tray nearby, and placed the tip on the first page. When you sign this, I said slowly, you no longer get to say I'm just being defiant. You don't get to treat me like a difficult child. I'll take responsibility for helping find a legal path forward, but I will not bear all the consequences. He looked at me. His face had aged noticeably in less than 2 days. But in his eyes, for the first time, I saw something that looked almost like acknowledgement. He signed, without a word. My mother was slower. She held the pen with an unsteady hand, but she signed too. And when she set the pen down, I saw her lips move. Not in apology, not in blame, but with, thank you for coming back. I nodded without answering. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I stood up and carefully packed the documents into my bag. I'll call the attorney this afternoon. As for Vanessa, if she needs me, she knows how to find me. I walked out of the living room without waiting for anyone to see me off. On the steps outside the porch, a soft breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass and damp earth after a night's rain. I stood there for a moment, feeling something inside me start to loosen like a wire that had been pulled too tight for too long, was finally starting to release. And I knew, from now on, everything I did would come from a completely different place, a place no longer dependent on anyone's approval from the house behind me. A year passed faster than I expected. Every morning in the western suburbs of Oregon began with the earthy scent of pine and soft sunlight streaming through the glass window overlooking the yard. The small wooden house perched on a hillside was the first place I had chosen just for myself, not because it was affordable, not because it was close to work, and definitely not to please anyone. I chose it simply because it was quiet, had a backyard big enough for a few vegetable beds, and when I stood on the porch at dusk, I could hear the wind pass through as if it truly wanted to whisper something in my ear. I still ran Blue Fern Capital, but 2 years ago, I started devoting more time to another project, something closer to my heart, and maybe more meaningful than any balance sheet filled with numbers. I called it the Overlooked Fund, a scholarship program specifically for young women who had been ignored, neglected, or pressured by their families to the point of losing themselves. Girls who hid their high test scores under the bed. Children who quietly saved up tutoring fees by wiping tables on weekends. People like I once was learning how to stay silent in a house full of laughter, but no room for honest voices. Each month, I read through dozens of applications. Some shared stories of parents taking out credit in their names and leaving the debt behind. Others had changed schools 5 times because of endless family arguments. One girl simply wrote, "I just want a place to prove I'm not invisible." I read them, marked them, and called each applicant, not to verify facts, but to hear their voices, to let them know someone was listening without interrupting. One early March morning, while I was reviewing the summer counseling program schedule, a new email popped up on my screen. Sender: Vanessa Hartwell. Subject: if I still have a chance. I opened it. Just a few lines. No long explanation. No excuses. Kinsley, I'm sorry. I understand now. If I still have a chance to speak with you, I hope we can start again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just hoping for the chance to understand you better. Vanessa. I sat still for a long time after reading it, not angry, not overwhelmed, just quietly realizing that sometimes people don't need a big argument to lose of each other. Sometimes all it takes is too long a silence where no one truly listens. I didn't reply. Not because I wasn't ready to forgive, but because I wanted to keep that silence as part of my own journey. Silence, now, wasn't a sign of being overlooked. It was a conscious, whole, and peaceful choice. By late spring, I received an invitation from the National Finance Foundation, an independent organization honoring individuals who contribute to their communities through finance, investment, and education. The award ceremony was held in Seattle, inside a large hall draped in white fabric and warm golden lights. I arrived in a simple black dress, my hair tied in a low bun, no flashy accessories, just a small pair of white pearl earrings. The only gift my mother ever gave me without asking for the price. The person who introduced me on stage was Ellen Faraday, a scholar I had admired since my earliest days in college. When she read my name aloud, I stepped forward, holding a gold-plated plaque engraved with the words, "For creating opportunities that turn the overlooked into the unforgettable." The stage lights weren't as harsh as I had imagined. They were soft, diffused, just enough for me to see the faces of every person in the audience clearly. I took the microphone, eyes scanning the rows of guests. I grew up in a household where every achievement I made was seen as expected. I began, my voice steady. I used to think I had to do more, be better, just to be heard. But over the years, I've come to realize the problem wasn't that I wasn't good enough. It was that those around me weren't ready to see. There was a gentle murmur from the audience below. I paused for a moment. Today, I don't accept this award just for myself. I accept it on behalf of the young women still quietly existing in rooms where their voices go unanswered. I accept it for the ones labeled the self-sufficient one, and therefore, no one. bothers to check on. I lifted my gaze, a soft smile playing on my lips, because sometimes the ones they overlook become the ones they can never ignore again. Applause followed, not thunderous, but even, warm, and sincere. That evening, back at the house on the hill, I slipped off my shoes at the door and walked into the backyard. Under the faint moonlight, the lavender rose swayed gently in the breeze. I sat down on the long wooden bench nestled in the middle of the garden, opened my laptop, logged into the overlooked funds system, and began reviewing 3 new applications. At the bottom of the list was a scanned handwritten letter from a 17-year-old girl in Montana. In her letter, she wrote, "I never thought anyone could understand how I felt until I read about you. I just want to go to college so I can escape a place where I feel like I don't exist. I don't need much. I just need someone to give me a chance." I placed my hand on the keyboard, clicked accepted, and flagged it priority support. Then I got up, walked around to the front of the house, where the porch light still glowed. No one was waiting for me in the dark. But I knew, right here, I no longer needed to stand in the background. I no longer needed to knock just to be let into a room with light. And I knew, from now on, no one would dare turn their back on the ones who once felt invisible, because we had learned how to show up for ourselves. Have you ever felt overlooked by the very people who were supposed to love you most? Have you ever sat quietly at a family gathering, knowing that no one truly saw the real you? No one understood the effort you've silently poured into becoming who you are? If you have, maybe you'll understand why I chose this path not for revenge, but to affirm my own worth. I no longer blame my family, because sometimes it takes enough silence, enough loss, for people to finally learn how to listen to each other. And, sometimes, we don't need someone to save us. We just need them not to stand in the way when we rise on our own. My story is just one of countless fragments about family relationships, where love can be healing, but can also wound deeply when misplaced. What about you? If you were in my place, would you choose silence to keep the peace, or would you stand up and reclaim your voice? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly hope to hear your stories and perspectives because every shared voice can become a guiding light for someone else walking through their own loneliness. And if you'd like to join me in discovering more real, moving, and powerful stories about family, hit that follow button. The stories to come might make you cry, smile, or maybe just feel a little less alone on your own journey.